Hey, what's up guys? Today we're going to be going over a quick startup guide in Star CCM. This series isn't meant to teach you the theory behind CFD or very specific methods or for you to develop an intuition, but rather it's a quick startup guide so that in the future when you get stuck, you can quickly look back at this video and not have to skip through a bunch of videos. So let's get started. When you first open Star CCM, you'll end up with a screen like this where it's mostly empty. So you're going to want to open a new file. I'm going to pick parallel on localhost, and I'm going to pick 16 since I have 16 cores. And this may vary per machine, but for me, I have 16. And when I press OK, you'll see that Star CCM tries to find the license file. And here is a good indicator if you can't find your license file or if your license server isn't properly set up. You'll see an error code here. So my Star CCM looks a little bit different, but usually you end up with something like this where you have your all your folders and your workflow where most of your work will be done, and then the properties tab or the properties window to explain kind of the different settings within these folders. And then of course you have your output. So if we look at our first folder, which should always be our first step, it's our geometry, and our geometry is empty. There's absolutely nothing. So to import a geometry, you can go to File, Import, Import Surface Mesh, or the same button exists here. So I'm going to upload my geometry, and I just have to find it. And once I've selected it, another window will pop up. What I like to do is I don't like to merge parts by name. I like to keep them separate because I've set it up that way. I don't want to create part contacts, and I don't want to simplify the assembly structure. I want to receive the I want to receive the part in Star CCM just as I had intended it within the CAD. And once you have all of that, make sure you set your tessellation density to very fine, and then I press OK. And every time you import a part, a geometry scene will automatically be created. You can either edit the scene in this window where you can edit what kind of parts you're looking at or any outlines. Or you can go here to scenes and see your list of scenes. So you'll see we'll have the vehicle. Now, say for example you forgot to import one part of your car. You don't have to delete everything, right? You can still press the import surface mesh, and then you can click your additional parts. Same rules apply. And every time you import a new part, you will create a geometry scene. So you can either delete the old one or just close it. And as you can see, now I have my car and my simulation domain. So once you've gotten to this point, you can kind of look around and get used to the viewer. You can use your left click to rotate around, your right click to pan around. And there's many other shortcuts like the control and left click where you can rotate about a point, right? But what's most important is that now that we have our geometry defined, as you can see, under parts you have your fluid domain, FD, your simulation domain, and your car, which right now are unnamed. And we'll get to that later. But what's most important is to understand what's next, because it's not necessarily obvious. So in order to get this from a part to an actual simulation domain with a proper mesh and proper physics defined, we kind of go through this process. And while this is not everything, it's a good start. So the first operation is subtract. We're going to subtract the car from the fluid domain. And if we select the car and fluid domain, and then the target as the fluid domain, we're saying that we're going to take assembly 1, which is the car, and subtract it from the fluid domain. And you'll see exactly what I mean by that later. And then the next operation is the surface wrapper. Basically what it does is that it takes the geometry and applies a wrap around it to kind of cover up any harsh edges, things that are difficult to read by Star CCM, so it doesn't give you errors later on in your mesh. Think about it as if you have a brown box for your Christmas present, but you wrap it in nice wrapping paper. That's basically what it's doing. Finally, when you have your surface wrapper, the last one is to actually make a mesh. And in Star CCM, it is called an automated mesh. And here you, depending on what your settings are, but I like to use surface remesher, automatic surface repair. And then you can either use trim, tetrahedral, or polyhedral. We're not going to get into that, but what I use is polyhedral. And then I press OK. And basically, that is all of your operations that you will have. So once you've gotten to this point and you've selected all of your operations, you've imported your parts, you probably want to save your simulation. So you can go to File, Save, and you can save it somewhere. And right when you save it, you'll have 2 simulation files with the same name. Make sure you don't separate them or you'll lose all your data. Also, there's a new autosave feature that you can enable, and you can read here and see exactly what it does. So one of the options is autosave after volume mesh, or autosave after the automated mesh operation, right? So you can check that, and every time you run the automated mesh, it will save the file. Or you can have something that triggers it, like when you're running your simulation, if you can code something that if something happens, you want to save it, or per iteration. These are really helpful, and I recommend using them. But that's it for now. Next video, we'll talk about exactly how to set up your operations and what they really are doing.